Welcome to Aston Means Business. I'm Steve Dyson, the journalist presenting this regular podcast for Aston Business School. We're currently working with the Aston Centre for Growth to turn this podcast attention towards how small businesses, known as SMEs, are coping with the economic shutdown caused by the coronavirus pandemic. This special series is called Aston Means Business, SMEs Dealing with COVID-19. We're talking to businesses who are taking part or who've previously taken part in Aston Centre for Growth's programmes. We're giving them a voice to discuss their challenges, share their experiences and explain how they're dealing with the crisis. We'll also be interviewing some of Aston Business School's top academics and other experts, getting their valuable insight, analysis and advice for SMEs. Please bear with us as we're recording all our interviews remotely via online technology, strictly following government restrictions, and therefore there might be sometimes an impact on sound quality. This episode will feature Alec Anderson, Managing Director of Koolmill Systems Limited, a company working globally on a new, faster and cheaper way to mill rice and cereals. But joining me first is Dr. Jeff Parks. Dr. Parks is a senior lecturer at Aston Business School and an expert in business strategy with a focus on marketing and international operations. Hello to you, Jeff, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, Steve. Hi.
Jeff, COVID-19 has hit the entire global economy. Here in Britain, the government's offered a range of assistance to get companies through the crisis, from furloughing workers to deferring VAT, and from rates relief to a form of grants on low-cost loans. But what about companies with major operations, costs and staffing abroad? What are some of the main challenges for companies based here that trading internationally?
I mean, Steve, it certainly complicates the landscape because this particular crisis, in many ways, unlike the crisis of 2008, has hit the global logistics in terms of travelling and trading activities. So, in a sense, it presents SMEs with a much broader range of problems to deal with. But I think it still comes back to the way that we consider stakeholder management, and that becomes a really critical part of any business's survival strategy through this kind of crisis. How we look at a business from the perspective of every single group that interacts with it, and how we can, as a business owner, how we can engage with those different stakeholders to make sure that we survive the crisis, we get through it, and also that we've got some semblance of an organization to come back to and we can build on in the future. So I think it's through stakeholder management, be it the way that manage customers, which may internationally be looking for more online activities, perhaps. Important to look at the actual value that they're looking for that's going to help and support customers through this particular problem, and also maybe looking at sort of scenario planning. So in terms of what's looking at the future as we come out of this crisis, what those customers are going to be looking for. So I think it's the management of stakeholders in its broader sense, I think is going to be quite key. That includes the way you manage suppliers, really focusing on who are your key suppliers required to get through this crisis. Things like whoever manages your payroll for you, your accountants, because it's going to be key to providing with the right data. If you're talking to banks, another stakeholder, giving them the right financial information to make sure that they can provide you with the right financial support, perhaps, or even your employees, be it company directors or guys on the ground, making sure that you've made them aware of not only your position, but the position that they're in as employees. If they've got to speak to their mortgage companies or whatever, what their individual circumstances are. So it's the way that you manage external stakeholders, and also maybe how you manage yourself. The way you're making decisions. Suddenly, decision making becomes a real key attribute that you need to be careful that you're looking after yourself. You're taking time. You're not panicking. You're engaging in your team to double check that the decisions that you're making are the right decisions for this particular point in the crisis. So I think stakeholder management for me becomes utterly critical in this kind of environment.
Joining me online now is Alec Anderson. Alec's the Managing Director of Koolmill Systems Limited. Hello to you, Alec.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning to you. And Alec, thanks very much for joining us on this special COVID-19 podcast. Alec, first of all, tell us a bit more about Koolmill. Where is Koolmill based and what does it do?
Well, thanks for inviting me to come and chat with you today, Steve. Koolmill's based in Solihull, and we work globally. Right now we have projects in India, China, Nigeria and the UK. And those are funded by Innovate UK and the Indian and Chinese governments.
Okay, and just to get my head around that a bit more and also to give a picture to our listeners, just tell us a bit about your business structure, how many staff you employ here and abroad, etc., and turnover if you can.
Yeah, so for me, it all started actually at Aston in 1984 when I was a student there, and I went for a summer vacation job at a local company, and that turned into my final year project. I then joined the company, and we subsequently bought the company. We have we're a family-owned business based here in Solihull, founded by my wife and myself when we bought it out. And we have two trading activities. One's in agri-tech and one's in employee engagement, culture change consultancy. On the agri-tech side, we've successfully pioneered a globally significant cereal milling technology, primarily for rice, although we can mill other cereals as well. And essentially what we do in that is turn paddy rice from the field into what you buy in Tesco's. We have a joint venture in China, which is can be quite challenging, clearly, at the moment, as one of our project partners is in Wuhan. We have 3 directors and 2 senior engineers. One of our engineers is based here in the UK and one's in India. And we have academic and commercial partners in the UK, India, China, Turkey, Greece and Nigeria. So although we're a small company, we've developed a wide range of strategic partnerships.
Okay, and what's the unique selling point of Koolmill? What do you do differently that has got so many people interested?
In the rice side, we have a very radical, novel milling technology. It's very efficient. We call the company Koolmill because we don't use a lot of power. We save about 90% of the power, and that means that the rice is milled cold, which is a big problem in the existing machinery. The existing machinery is attritional, so there's massive loss and damage. So some of the numbers from rice milling are quite shocking in terms of the waste, and we address that waste.
So you're more sustainable and you do it quicker and at less cost?
Yes, absolutely. We would say we would contribute to 16 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Although when we say that, some people think we're here to save the world. We're not. We're trying to create a very positive impact business that's environmentally, socially and economically beneficial to the stakeholders.
Sounds like you've got a tremendous product and service out there. But of course, like all of us, I guess your business has had some effects from COVID-19 pandemic hitting us.
Yes, you could say interesting times. So, it kind of all changed on a toss of a coin, effectively. This year we were on track to double our turnover, probably to around about 300,000. We'd won a big turnover on a big tender on the consultancy division, and we don't know whether that's going to go ahead or not. We were about to earn our first royalties from China with a new license agreement we had done there, and we were about to launch commercially in India at the end of April into early May. But of course, China, India and the UK are all on lockdown, so we're not sure for how long. So we're going to have to seek extensions in our projects, but we don't know how long those extensions need to be. And of course, there won't be any extra budget. But for us, it's just another problem to deal with. There have been several along the way. Like I think it was Sarah yesterday I was listening to said, like many other SMEs, it's survive, then thrive.
Absolutely, and that's hopefully what Aston Centre for Growth here at Aston Business School is going to help you and others to do. But to do that, of course, we need to know what's going on in your business and what's going well in terms of surviving and what's not going so well. So with that in mind, there's been a load of finance and assistance measures announced by the government. Is that going to help your cash flows, your survival, your planning in any way?
I think the short answer is once we actually understand it and see the detail, some will and some won't. For example, I had a productive day yesterday on the phone with HMRC, who've been very supportive, I have to say. They instantly agreed to defer PAYE until July, and of course they've already announced the VAT deferment. And for a small company like us, that conserves cash, and cash is king at these times. So it gives us time to take a breath. Let's see what the detail of all these support plans are. And then even in July, HMRC have said, look, let's see how the situation is then, and we can talk about a time to pay if that's necessary, or if things have picked up again, and then we can move forward from there. From the financial support side, I think there's a lot of confusion, and inevitably, because of the scale of what's happening and the short times in which these things have been put in place, there's not a lot of detail, and there are a lot of conflicting opinions. My observation from experience would be the headline soundbite is often not matched by action on the ground. And we're a bit of a quirky company. We don't fit into that tick box, computer says no banking culture. Our main assets are IP, and in banking terms, that has no value. So these are the sort of challenges that we're trying to get our head around at the moment. Sarah seems, from yesterday's podcast, seems much further ahead than we are at the moment. We're still trying to get a communication with the bank to understand what it is we can actually qualify for.
I understand. And the bank, are they not being acceptable of your arguments, or are they not even talking to you at the moment?
At the moment, we haven't actually made communication. We could do it online if we had only 2 directors or 2 shareholders, but as we have 3, that's not an option for us. I went into the business banking main office in Birmingham on the 11th of March, and I'm still waiting on a call back. So, yes, and understandably, they must be deluged by people saying, what can we qualify for? So getting through can be quite a challenge in itself, and then understanding what it is they actually want and to process the loans.
Is there anything else from the government that you need clarifying?
Well, I'm confused over the 80% grant for salaries, and you can interpret that in different ways. If I pay somebody £1,000 as 80% of their salary, do I get the £1,000 back, or do I get £800 back? I.e., is it 80% of what I pay them, not 80% of what they used to be paid? I'm unclear on that, and I know there are different viewpoints on that. But again, until the detail and the calculations, the online portals opened up, nobody's going to know. So these are some of the challenges. I have an Indian engineer, so I can't furlough him in any case. So yeah, and also from a director's point of view, as a small company, I can't furlough myself, or potentially not myself, because I've still got to operate the company. And of course, if you're doing any work for the company, you can't be furloughed. So, I mean, with the uncertainty of our projects, ideally we could perhaps mothball the company for 1 or 2 months until the situation with the projects becomes clearer. Is China going to open up? Is India going to open up? And then we could pick it up again. But that doesn't look like it's necessarily going to be an option for us. And to be fair to the government, you can't have a perfect solution for every company. They're trying their best, I'm sure, in these difficult times.
I'm sure that's the case, Alec, but it's important that they hear from businesses on the ground like yours, and that's what this podcast will hopefully do. I mean, if the 2 main things that you're talking about there, if the government's loan system with the banks came through at an acceptable rate, if it was more clear what you could do with furloughing and it was more enabled for businesses like yours, are those the kind of things which could help you to adapt and keep trading during the crisis, or are you going to manage anyway?
Yes and no. From our consultancy side, we can move a lot of that online. In fact, we've, like many companies, I think Zoom's become the byword for everything at the moment. But from our rice business, our main markets are India, China, and they're shut down. So until they open up, until UK's opened up, and until there's an airline that can actually fly us someplace, then potentially we're limited in what we can do in those projects right now.
So it's just keeping ticking over, really, that you need help with.
Yes, it's the our big cost that we can't control is our patents. We've spent hundreds of thousands of pounds. We have about 70% of the rice world covered by patents, and the problem is once you start that clock ticking, there's no way of stopping it. So that's where the cash draw will come for us, but it's manageable. We are small, we are lean, so and we've been here before. So 2008 was a good learning.
I'm sure it was. I mean, given 1 or 2 things that you're still trying to clarify, let's put those to one side for a moment. But looking ahead, let's think 3-4 months ahead. Will Koolmill be able to bounce back when things start returning to near normality?
Absolutely. We got plans to expand the business. In fact, it's really frustrating because we were just about to press the go button and now we've had to pause again. So we have plans to expand the business rapidly, both in India and China. These are postponed, not cancelled. But given the global shock, inevitably there's going to be lags before recovery. I'm not entirely convinced that it's all just going to pick up where we left off the minute somebody says go. I think it's going to be different to that. But food is not a discretionary purchase. For 3.5 billion people, rice is literally life. There is a global need and we have a solution. So with access to resources, we can scale up quickly. Without it, it'll take a little longer. If travel's a problem, we can work and support our partners and employees in India and in China. So I guess it's about not panicking. It's about looking at your options, managing your cash. My keywords would be belief, agility, and perseverance. And one thing's for sure, we're in a different world now. The pre-COVID-19 norms, I don't think will ever return. And so to thrive, we will need to set or adapt to what will become the new norms. And I think that's going to be the reality for us going forward.
Absolutely. Alec Anderson, Managing Director of Koolmill Systems Limited, many thanks for joining us, and very best wishes to you and your colleagues and your company as you tackle the next few months ahead.
Thanks, Steve.
Hopefully still with me is Dr. Jeff Parks from Aston Business School. Hello again, Jeff.
Hi, Steve. Hi.
Jeff, you heard businessman Alec Anderson there talking about his business and the fact that Koolmill was about to see royalties coming in from China and commercial activities starting in India, both huge nations that are now shut down because of COVID-19, which means Koolmill has to renegotiate extensions to the project, but with no extra budget. It's a huge dilemma, isn't it?
I mean, it's a massive dilemma. And I think in many ways, you've got to appreciate that you have to manage the business during this period with with lower revenues. So that does mean that you've got to speak to your suppliers to make sure that you defer any payments. I spoke earlier about recognizing who your key suppliers are, and it's important to look after those. But if you've got suppliers that it is possible to defer rent or there's government support on rates and these kind of things to try and push back. Your suppliers are going to be much more sympathetic about understanding that you want to be around for the future and be trading with them in the future. So I think if organisation like Alex's can talk to their supplier base as a key stakeholder, make sure you engage with the guys that you're going to need to survive. But try and push back costs as much as you possibly can. And as I said, if there are still services you can provide online that have got value to your customer, then there's a different income stream there. And in a sense, I think almost, sometimes, Steve, necessity is the mother of invention. And to this could welcome, new income streams that organisations like Alex may not have realised were possible, but now will become possible because perhaps this ongoing, restriction or obstacle in the global economy now could be with us for certainly some months to come. So I think coping with reduced turnover, and I think that's what Alex was describing there, is about minimizing your costs, maximizing whatever revenues you can secure, and making sure that you've got whatever assistance you can possibly get.
No, it's really useful. Now, Alec told us, and you heard him say that he was grateful for the government's what he called intent to help businesses, and that indeed he'd already deferred some of his PAYE and VAT elements until July, which is good news for him. But one of the huge ongoing costs for Koolmill is its patent investments. And Alec is worried that this intellectual property has no value to banking in terms of potential loans. Is he right to worry about that?
Yeah, look, Steve, I think that the government, our government, have responded to this in quite a robust way, and I think that I share. I'm an advisor to some small firms, and I've done for some time. I mean, I share his caution about banking support, but I do think that in these circumstances, our own government have taken the decision to support the sector. Now, I do think it's what's what's critical here is that firms like Alex's don't take on, so much new debt that it becomes unsustainable to service in the longer term. But I think that this level of government support is going to be there. I think it's important to, engage with banks positively. However long you've got to wait on the phone to speak to them, but I think you've got to go through that process, make the applications quickly. I think those funds, are in place. You've got to test that system, and get what support that you can get. I think again, I think Alex touched on it. The lessons from 2008, 2009 are going to sadly catch some people, some organisations out. Not Alex's, I don't think, because what's critical now is that your accounts are up to date. You've got good working capital management that you can demonstrate to a bank. So it's not about just being in control, even in these difficult circumstances. You've got to demonstrate that you're in control. In a sense, we're back to a level of credit rationing of a sort. And if you're the organization that has a plan, banks will be much more likely to support you than they are anybody else. But also on the flip side, I do think the offer of furloughed employees is, organisations like Alex has got to take full advantage of that. That isn't a loan; it's a grant. It's in that sense, it's free money. So you've got Alex's organisation and other organisations have to take advantage of that because, in a sense, it could be used to some degree as a back-to-back. We may need a loan to pay our payroll. And once the government funding comes from the payroll, we can repay the loan. So we've just got to be smart about the way that we manage our working capital during this quite difficult period. And also, I would just throw this in there. Since 2008, there are new lenders on the block, and I appreciate that. Our first port of call is with our primary bank in these kind of circumstances. But there are new lenders that have appeared in the market over the last 10 years, like Funding Circle, these kind of organisations, with much more, faster, more efficient, I would argue, lending programs. And I think where they are included in the government scheme, then I think, often their application processes are quicker, they're more online, they're much more efficient. And that I would recommend anybody that's applying for these government loans, don't just use your own bank. Check out one of the new providers and get yourself in a position where, you might have a choice.
I get you. We also heard Alex talk about potentially trying to freeze his operations and go into hibernation for a couple of months. And you again mentioned the importance of furloughing. But on the employment front, Koolmill and possibly other companies out there, they've got issues. In Koolmill's case, they've got an Indian engineer. He can't be furloughed. Alec himself is a paid director in a way that prevents him from furloughing himself. How do companies approach it when they've got costs they can't defer and they can't hibernate?
I think it's about cutting the organisation down as low as you possibly can. And again, I think it's about trying to make sure that you take as much advantage of those furlough schemes as you can. In a sense, you're accessing whatever financial resource you can. I think, as Alex said, he'd had a positive conversation with HMRC and the VAT guy. I think that's very, very sensible. And they're taking a very practical approach, to the problem. So, and again, as I said, on the supplier side, go through your supplier list individually. Which of these guys am I going to have a difficult conversation with, and which of them am I going to absolutely need to get through this crisis? Because what you don't want to do is, stop paying your accountant and suddenly need a cash flow forecast, and he's saying, well, you haven't paid me for 2 months. You've got to it's a survival strategy, and you've got to think, okay, so who are the guys that I still need to support? I'm not going to ignore the other guys. I'm just going to say, look, we are where we are. You need to do what I'm doing, which is managing my costs really as carefully as I possibly can, and you need to do the same thing.
Jeff, that's great advice, and many thanks for joining us today and for providing your insight on the challenges faced by what are sometimes quite complex companies in the face of COVID-19. Thanks very much, Jeff.
Thanks, Steve.
Yes, thanks there to both Jeff Parks of Aston Business School and Alec Anderson of Koolmill Systems for joining us. We'll be back in the next few days with more case studies of how businesses are coping and with more crucial analysis and advice from academics and experts here at Aston. Aston means business, SMEs dealing with COVID-19. Thanks for listening.